Black Maid greeted Korean Mafia boss's dad. Her Busan Dialect greeting had every guest frozen. The entire room went silent. Kim Young-ho, the most feared Korean Mafia boss on the East Coast, had just watched his elderly father freeze mid-step. All because of her. All because of Vanessa. The Black Maid everyone overlooked, everyone ignored, everyone dismissed. Until she opened her mouth and spoke in a Busan dialect so pure, so authentic, it transported the old man back to the streets of his youth. They thought she was nothing. They thought she was invisible. They were wrong. The luxury hotel's gleaming marble lobby might as well have been a battlefield. Designer suits and diamond watches couldn't hide what these men truly were. Killers, smugglers, extortionists. The Park family didn't build their empire on kindness. They built it on blood. And now the patriarch, Old Man Park, had finally emerged from Korea to inspect his son's American operations, bringing with him expectations heavy enough to crush steel. Vanessa Jenkins knew the weight of expectations. At 27, she'd spent a lifetime being underestimated. Too black for Korea, too Korean for America, a woman caught between worlds belonging fully to neither. The hotel management had given strict instructions. Be invisible, be silent, be nothing. Just another black face in a service uniform. Just another woman to be ignored. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact. Speak only when spoken to. The irony wasn't lost on her. These were the same instructions her foster mother had drilled into her on the streets of Busan when she was 8 years old. The same rules for survival. The staff meeting that morning had been a masterclass in fear. Mr. Cho, the hotel manager, had sweated through his silk shirt as he paced before his assembled staff. The Park family owns half of Busan and a growing piece of New York. They don't stay at hotels, they buy them. They don't visit cities, they consume them. Today they honor us with their presence. Any mistake, any disrespect, any hint of poor service, and your employment won't be the only thing terminated. Am I understood? Vanessa had stood at the back, silent, watching, always listening. The other staff avoided her gaze. The Korean staff especially kept their distance. The black woman who spoke their language too well made them uncomfortable. She was an anomaly they couldn't categorize, couldn't understand. Their whispers followed her through the service corridors. The Park's arrival transformed the hotel into a fortress. Security men with earpieces and bulges under their tailored jackets positioned themselves at every entrance. The regular guests were cleared out, the restaurant closed to the public. Vanessa moved silently through the preparations, changing sheets, arranging flowers, making everything perfect. Her hands didn't shake. They never shook anymore. Not since that night in Busan 10 years ago when everything burned. She was assigned to the upper floors, away from the Park's penthouse suite. Away from danger. Away from recognition. Mr. Cho had made sure of that. You back stairwell duty only, he'd snapped at her. No elevator, no main corridors. If they see you. He didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. But fate has a way of mocking our best precautions. A service elevator malfunction. A last-minute request for more traditional Korean teas. And suddenly Vanessa was rushing through the VIP corridor, tray in hand, head down, praying to remain unseen. The elevator doors opened. Vanessa stepped out directly into the path of Old Man Park. Time slowed to a crawl. He was smaller than she expected. Frilier. His designer suit hung on shoulders that once commanded respect through fear alone. His cane, dragon-headed, gold-tipped, wasn't just for show anymore. But his eyes were unchanged, cold, calculating, seeing everything. He saw her, really saw her. Their collision was inevitable. The tray wobbled. Vanessa stabilized it with reflexes honed through years of survival. The old man's security detail reached for weapons that weren't supposed to exist on American soil. I apologize for my carelessness, sir, Vanessa said automatically in English, her voice deliberately soft, submissive, expected. But Old Man Park didn't move. He stared at her, his head tilted slightly, his eyes narrowing as if trying to place a half-forgotten melody. You are not Korean, he stated in English so heavily accented it was barely recognizable. No, sir, Vanessa replied, eyes downcast. playing her role perfectly. Then why are you here? He switched to Korean, the words sharp, testing. Something in his tone, in the particular rhythm of his question, triggered a memory buried so deep Vanessa thought she'd finally killed it. A rainy afternoon in a small apartment. Her foster mother teaching her the proper way to address elders, the proper way to show respect, the proper way to survive. Without thinking, Vanessa responded in perfect Busan dialect, her accent so authentic it could have come from the fish markets near Jigalki. To serve with honor is to find honor in serving, respected elder. The traditional saying flowed from her lips before she could stop it. The corridor went silent, deathly silent, the kind of silence that precedes violence. Old Man Park's cane froze mid-tap against the marble floor. His security detail exchanged glances of confusion, then alarm. And from the penthouse doorway emerged his son, Young-ho Park, the dragon of New York, the businessman with bloody hands, the heir to an empire built on broken bones. What is happening here? Young-ho demanded in English, his voice cultured, American-educated, but with an undercurrent of steel. Vanessa kept her eyes down, cursing herself silently. One mistake, one moment of forgotten caution. She'd survived for 10 years by being invisible, and in an instant of unthinking response, she'd painted a target on her back. The old man ignored his son. He stepped closer to Vanessa, the tap of his cane echoing in the silence. "Look at me," he commanded in Korean. Vanessa raised her eyes slowly, carefully keeping her face neutral, unreadable. The mask she'd perfected through years of necessity. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" Old Man Park asked, still in Korean, his voice softer now, curious rather than threatening. "I grew up in Busan, sir," Vanessa answered truthfully but incompletely. The old man's eyebrows rose. "A black child in Busan? When?" "From age 8 to 17, sir." A flash of something, recognition? Suspicion? Crossed the old man's weathered face. "Your name?" "Vanessa Jenkins, sir." "No." He waved his hand dismissively. "Your Korean name." The question hit her like a physical blow. No one had called her by that name in a decade. She'd buried it alongside the memories of flames consuming the only home she'd known, alongside the faces of the family who'd taken in an abandoned black child when no one else would. "Park Min-ji," she said, the name feeling both foreign and achingly familiar on her tongue. And there it was, the flash of absolute recognition in the old man's eyes, the slight parting of his lips, the sharp intake of breath from Young-ho, who had stepped closer, his attention now fully fixed on the black maid with a Korean name and a Busan accent that even he, with his American education, couldn't perfectly replicate. "Park," Young-ho repeated, the single syllable loaded with implication. Old Man Park raised his hand, silencing his son without looking at him. "Min-ji," he repeated, testing the name. "The daughter of Park Sang-min?" Vanessa's tray nearly slipped from suddenly numb fingers. No one had spoken her foster father's name to her in 10 years. No one in America knew that name, knew that connection, knew what it meant. "Yes, sir," she whispered. The old man nodded once, decisively. "You will serve us tonight. Only you." It wasn't a request. If you're wondering how a black orphan ended up in Busan with a Korean name and the dialect of a native, you're asking the same question that burned in Young-ho Park's eyes as he watched Vanessa prepare their private dining room that evening. He stood in the doorway, dismissing the security that normally shadowed him, watching her arrange the banchan dishes with the precision of someone who'd done this countless times before. "You handle those like you were born to it," he observed in English, his voice deceptively casual. "I was trained well, sir," Vanessa replied, keeping her focus on the task, maintaining the practiced deference that had kept her alive in two different worlds. "By Park Sang-min," Young-ho said, the name a deliberate provocation. Vanessa's hands didn't falter as she placed the final dish. "Yes, sir. You know who he was to my father." It wasn't a question, so Vanessa didn't answer. Of course she knew. Everyone in Busan's underworld knew that Park Sang-min had once been Old Man Park's right hand, his most trusted lieutenant, his blood brother in all but actual relation. Until the night everything changed. "My father thinks you're a ghost," Young-ho continued, stepping into the room, closing the distance between them. A message from the past. "I'm just a maid, sir," Vanessa said, the lie bitter on her tongue. Young-ho laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "A maid who speaks Busan dialect better than I do. A maid with the name Park. A maid who knows exactly how to arrange a traditional table for the elder of a Korean crime family." He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. "Who are you really, Vanessa Jenkins? Or should I call you Minji?" The sound of her Korean name in his mouth sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "Vanessa is fine, sir. And I'm exactly what I appear to be. Someone trying to survive." Something in her tone made him pause. For a moment, the calculated intimidation faltered, and he really looked at her. Not as a potential threat or an anomaly, but as a human being with a story written in the careful way she held herself, in the watchfulness of her eyes, in the deliberate control of every movement. "How did you end up in Busan?" he asked, his voice different now, actually curious. "American missionary couple abandoned me there when I was 8. They decided a black child was too difficult to explain to their congregation back home. The truth slipped out before she could package it more palatably. Your father's friend found me sleeping in a shipping container at the docks. Instead of calling the police, he took me home." Young-ho's expression shifted, surprise breaking through his controlled facade. "Sang-min took in a black child off the streets? The same man who once hung a rival from a cargo crane for disrespect." "People contain multitudes, Mr. Park," Vanessa replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Even criminals." Something unreadable flashed in Young-ho's eyes. "Even maids who speak like gangsters' daughters?" The confrontation might have escalated if Old Man Park hadn't chosen that moment to enter the private dining room, his security detail creating a perimeter before melting into the background. The old man assessed the perfectly arranged table with approval before taking his seat at the head. "Sit, Young-ho," he commanded in Korean. "Minji will serve us." And so began the most dangerous dinner of Vanessa's life. Course after course, she moved with practiced grace, refilling drinks before they were empty, presenting each dish with the proper respect, anticipating needs before they were voiced. All while aware of Young-ho's unwavering attention, his eyes following her every movement, searching for flaws, for hints, for confirmation of whatever suspicion had taken root in his mind. The conversation remained in Korean, shifting between business discussions and reminiscences of Busan. The old man seemed to take pleasure in watching Vanessa respond to his native tongue, occasionally addressing questions directly to her about particular neighborhoods or landmarks, testing the depth of her knowledge. Young-ho watched this bizarre interaction with growing tension, his jaw tightening each time Vanessa demonstrated another layer of authenticity that couldn't be faked, couldn't be learned from books or language apps. It might have continued that way. This strange dance of testing and proving, if fate hadn't intervened again, this time with the distinctive sound of silenced gunshots from the corridor outside. If you've never heard a suppressed gunshot in person, you might mistake it for something innocuous. A book dropping, a door closing too firmly. But Vanessa knew that sound intimately. It had been the soundtrack to her final night in Busan, the prelude to flames and screaming and loss. Her body reacted before her mind could process. She dropped the serving tray, lunged across the table, and tackled Old Man Park from his chair just as the window behind him exploded inward. Where his head had been a second earlier, the wall now displayed a perfect bullet hole. The room erupted into chaos. Security guards burst through the door, weapons drawn. Young-ho flipped the heavy table onto its side for cover, shouting orders in a mix of Korean and English. But Vanessa remained focused solely on the vulnerable old man beneath her, shielding his body with her own as she dragged him behind the minimal protection of an overturned chair. "Stay down," she commanded in Busan dialect, her tone leaving no room for argument even from a man unaccustomed to taking orders. Old Man Park stared up at her with wide eyes, the decades seeming to fall away as recognition bloomed fully on his face. "You move like him," he whispered. There was no time to acknowledge what they both knew, that Park Sang-min had trained his adopted daughter as thoroughly as he trained his men. Instead, Vanessa scanned the room, assessing threats and exits with practiced efficiency. "The kitchen," she said to Young-ho, who had pressed himself against the wall beside the shattered window, gun in hand. Service elevator to the garage. They'll have the main exits covered. Jung-ho stared at her, conflict evident in his expression. The instinct to protect his father warring with suspicion of the maid, who had just saved the old man's life and was now issuing tactical retreats like a seasoned soldier. "Trust me or die here," Vanessa said bluntly, reverting to English. "Your choice." Another bullet splintered the wooden chair beside them, making the decision for him. "Lead the way," Jung-ho ordered, moving to his father's side. "I'm right behind you." What followed was a harrowing escape through service corridors and back stairwells. Routes Vanessa knew intimately from months of invisible labor. She moved with a fighter's grace now, all pretense of subservience abandoned as she guided the Parks through the hotel's hidden arteries, evading the gunmen who had infiltrated multiple floors. When they encountered an armed man by the service elevator, Vanessa didn't hesitate. She disarmed him with a fluid combination of movements that spoke of years of training, rendering him unconscious with brutal efficiency before Jung-ho could even raise his weapon. "Who taught you to fight like that?" Jung-ho demanded as the elevator doors closed, sealing them momentarily in safety. "The same person who taught me to speak like this," Vanessa replied, checking the old man for injuries. "Your father's best friend." Old Man Park grasped her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Sang-min is dead," he stated, his eyes searching hers. "Burned in his home 10 years ago, with his entire household." "Not his entire household," Vanessa corrected quietly, the pain she'd suppressed for a decade bleeding into her voice. "I got out. Nobody else did." The elevator reached the garage level. The moment of revelation would have to wait as Vanessa guided them to a service vehicle, an unmarked van used for hotel deliveries. She hot-wired it with practiced ease while Jung-ho helped his father into the back. "You know who's trying to kill us?" Jung-ho asked as Vanessa pulled the van out of the garage through a service exit, avoiding the main drive where gunmen would certainly be waiting. "I have suspicions," she replied, navigating the New York streets with the confidence of someone who had planned escape routes as habitually as others plan their daily commute. "Share them," he commanded. Vanessa glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Old Man Park's gaze. "The attack pattern is identical to the one used on my family 10 years ago. Simultaneous entry points, sniper support, inside information about location and security. It's a signature." "Whose signature?" Old Man Park demanded, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Han Jin-woo," Vanessa replied, the name like poison on her tongue. "Your brother-in-law." The silence that followed was charged with decades of history that Vanessa had been too young to fully understand when she lived it, but had pieced together in the years since. How the Park family had fractured when Old Man Park chose Jung-ho, his son by his second wife, as heir apparent over Han Jin-woo, who had married the old man's daughter. How Jin-woo had disappeared from Busan after a failed power grab, presumed dead by many. How, months later, Sang-min's compound had burned to the ground, killing Vanessa's foster family and everyone loyal to them. "Jin-woo is dead," Jung-ho stated flatly. "No," Vanessa contradicted, taking a sharp turn down a narrow side street. "He's in Manhattan, has been for years, building his own organization, waiting for the right moment to finish what he started in Busan." "How could you possibly know that?" Jung-ho demanded. Vanessa met his eyes in the mirror again, letting him see the cold fury she'd carried for a decade. "Because I've been hunting him since the day he killed my family." If you're sitting there wondering how a hotel maid hunts a Korean crime lord while serving champagne to Wall Street executives, you're not alone. Jung-ho's expressions cycled through disbelief, anger, and reluctant fascination as Vanessa drove them to a safe house in Queens. A modest apartment above a Korean grocery store that no one would connect to the prestigious Park family. "Why here?" Jung-ho questioned as they helped the old man up the narrow staircase, the sound of their footsteps masked by the bustling market below. "Because it's mine," Vanessa answered simply, unlocking 3 separate deadbolts. "And because it's the last place Jin-woo would look for you." The apartment revealed the duality of Vanessa's existence. At first glance, it was unremarkable. Modest furniture, minimal decoration, nothing that screamed wealth or excess. But a trained eye would notice the strategic positioning of every piece, the sightlines to all entry points, the reinforced door frames. And behind a sliding bookcase, which Vanessa revealed after ensuring the old man was comfortable on her sofa, was a room that Jung-ho could scarcely believe. Maps covered the walls, surveillance photos, timeline charts, financial records. 10 years of meticulous intelligence gathering, all focused on a single target, Han Jin-woo and his growing American operation. My God! Jung-ho breathed, taking in the scope of Vanessa's investigation. You've been doing counterintelligence against a Korean crime syndicate while serving drinks at a hotel? I've worked 17 different service jobs in the past 10 years. Vanessa corrected, her voice detached, clinical. Hotels, restaurants, cleaning services, anywhere Jin-woo's people might frequent. Invisible positions where no one looks at your face, where no one remembers you. Places where you can listen. All to find the man who killed your family? Jung-ho clarified, studying a particularly detailed map of businesses in Manhattan with red pins indicating Jin-woo's holdings. All to finish what my father started. Vanessa corrected. Sang-min wasn't just killed. He was betrayed. He was investigating Jin-woo's connection to human trafficking. Specifically, the disappearance of young women from Busan's poorest neighborhoods. Girls no one would miss. Girls like I would have been if he hadn't found me first. Old man Park appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. Sang-min never brought this to me. Because he didn't have proof yet? Vanessa replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. And because he didn't know how deep Jin-woo's influence in your organization went. The old man's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Vanessa stated flatly. I'm telling you that Jin-woo has people inside your operation. Today's attack confirms it. They knew exactly where you'd be, exactly when. That kind of intelligence doesn't come from guesswork. Jung-ho's phone rang, shattering the tension. He answered it on speaker, a rapid-fire report in Korean from his head of security. 3 confirmed dead at the hotel. 4 of their own men injured. No sign of the shooters. And a disturbing detail. The hotel's security cameras had been disabled exactly 7 minutes before the attack. From the inside, using authorized access codes. Who had those codes? Vanessa asked as Jung-ho ended the call. Only our top-level security team, Jung-ho replied, his expression hardening. And Kim Min-ho, your chief financial officer, Vanessa noted. She crossed the room to a filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, and handed it to Jung-ho. He's been laundering money for Jin-woo for at least 3 years. Jung-ho stared at the documents, bank transfers, property records, shell companies, all meticulously compiled and annotated. How did you get these? Our own auditors haven't found any irregularities. Your auditors weren't raised by Park Sang-min, Vanessa replied simply, and they haven't spent 10 years with a single purpose. Old man Park sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. All this time, he murmured, Jin-woo alive. Sang-min murdered not for loyalty to me, but for uncovering the truth. He looked up at Vanessa, his eyes filled with a grief so raw it transcended language barriers and cultural differences. And you, his daughter, fighting this war alone. Not alone anymore, Jung-ho stated, his decision made. He turned to Vanessa, really seeing her now. Not as a maid, not as an anomaly, but as a warrior who had carried forward her father's mission with no resources, no backup, no support beyond her own determination. Tell us what you know. Everything. And so Vanessa finally unveiled the full extent of her investigation. How Jin-woo had established a parallel organization in America, how he'd infiltrated the park's legitimate businesses, how he'd been siphoning funds and resources for years, while positioning himself to eventually take over both criminal and legal operations. How he'd expanded beyond the traditional Korean Mafia activities into human trafficking, using the park's shipping infrastructure without their knowledge. The attack today wasn't just an assassination attempt, Vanessa explained, pointing to a calendar on her wall where today's date was circled in red. It's the first move in a complete takeover. Right now, Jin-woo's people are accessing your accounts, transferring assets, taking control of your digital infrastructure. Min-ho gave them the keys to the kingdom. How can you be so certain of the timing? Jung-ho demanded. Vanessa hesitated, then revealed her final piece of intelligence. Because I've had access to Jinwoo's secure communications for the past 6 months, my position at the hotel wasn't an accident. I knew your father was coming to New York. I knew Jinwoo planned to eliminate you both during the visit. What I didn't know was that I'd literally run into Old Man Park and blow my cover. The revelation that Vanessa had orchestrated her presence at this pivotal moment sent Young-ho pacing the small room, his instinctive distrust warring with the undeniable evidence before him. If what you're saying is true, we need to move now, he said finally, before they can complete the financial transfers. I already have, Vanessa replied, turning her laptop to show them a screen of code. I initiated countermeasures the moment we left the hotel. Your accounts are locked down. Emergency protocols are in place. Jinwoo can't touch your money, but neither can you. Not until we identify everyone involved in the conspiracy and clean house. Old Man Park stared at her, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. You are truly Sangmin's daughter, he said softly. He always said proper preparation prevents poor performance. The familiar saying, one Vanessa had heard countless times during her training, brought an unexpected sting of tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. We don't have time for nostalgia, she said sharply. Jinwoo will realize his financial attack failed. He'll move to physical assets next, your warehouses, distribution centers, front businesses. We need to secure them. Young-ho nodded, already dialing his most trusted lieutenants. Give me locations, priorities. As Vanessa outlined the most vulnerable targets and Young-ho relayed orders, a new dynamic emerged between them. A partnership forged in crisis, built on the foundation of shared enemies and unexpected connections. The Black Maid and the Korean heir apparent, united by the ghosts of Busan. The next 48 hours were a blur of strategic counterattacks. From Vanessa's modest apartment, they orchestrated a defensive campaign that left Jinwoo's forces reeling. Young-ho's men secured key properties. Loyal tech experts locked down digital assets. And most importantly, they identified the traitors within the Park organization, not just Min-ho, but 7 other high-ranking members who had sold their loyalty to Jinwoo's promises of wealth and power. Throughout it all, Vanessa revealed skills that went far beyond what even Sangmin could have taught her. Her understanding of digital security, financial systems, and tactical operations spoke of years of self-education, of turning herself into a weapon focused on a single target. Where did you learn all this? Young-ho asked during a rare quiet moment, as they waited for confirmation that a particularly valuable warehouse had been secured. Everywhere. Community college courses, online tutorials, books. I worked as a night cleaner at a cybersecurity firm for 6 months just to eavesdrop on their analysts. Vanessa replied, not looking up from her laptop. When revenge is all you have, you get creative. Not revenge, Old Man Park corrected from his position by the window, where he'd been watching the street below with the vigilance of a man who'd survived decades in a brutal business. Justice. Vanessa's hands stilled on the keyboard. Is there a difference? Revenge burns everything, including the one seeking it, the old man said, turning to face her. Justice builds something new from the ashes. The words hit Vanessa like a physical blow, exposing the hollow core of her decade-long mission. What had she been building? What life existed for her beyond this room of maps and surveillance photos? What identity did she have beyond the daughter of a murdered man? Before she could process this uncomfortable revelation, Young-ho's phone rang again. The news sent them all into motion. Jinwoo himself had been spotted entering a private club in Manhattan, a neutral territory where he conducted his most sensitive business. This is our chance, Young-ho declared, checking his weapon. We take him now. End this before it escalates further. It's a trap, Vanessa countered immediately. Jinwoo doesn't make public appearances during active operations. He's drawing you out. Or he's desperate because we've countered his every move, Young-ho argued. He's exposed and trying to retreat. You're not thinking clearly? Vanessa insisted, stepping between Young-ho and the door. This is exactly how he lured my father out 10 years ago. A visible target, an opportunity too good to pass up. Old Man Park raised his hand, silencing them both. She's right, Young-ho. It's too convenient. He turned to Vanessa. But we cannot let this opportunity pass. What do you suggest? In that moment, the final walls between them fell. The old crime boss was deferring to the judgment of a woman who, 3 days earlier, had been pouring his tea. The implicit trust in his question acknowledged what they all now understood, that Vanessa's decade of invisible warfare had prepared her for exactly this moment. We let him think his trap worked, Vanessa said after a moment of consideration. But we set our own. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Young-ho would appear to take the bait, approaching the club with minimal security, exactly what Jin-woo would expect from an arrogant heir desperate to end the threat to his succession. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Old Man Park's most loyal soldiers would infiltrate through service entrances and back alleys, positions familiar to someone who had spent years navigating the invisible pathways of service workers. You're coming with us? Young-ho questioned as Vanessa changed from her hotel uniform into tactical black, her movements efficient, practiced. Jin-woo killed my family, she replied simply. I've waited 10 years to look him in the eye when justice finds him. Old Man Park would remain at the safe house, protected by his most trusted guards. Though he protested, his physical limitations made him a liability in the field. He clasped Vanessa's hand before she left, pressing something into her palm. Sang-min would want you to have this, the old man said softly. Vanessa opened her hand to find a small jade pendant, identical to the one her foster father had always worn. A family heirloom she thought had been lost in the fire. How did you? She began. He gave it to me the day before he died, Old Man Park revealed, pain etching new lines in his weathered face. He said he had discovered something that might change everything. That if anything happened to him, I should find his daughter and give her this. Vanessa stared at the pendant, then at the old man. You knew I was alive? All this time? No, he admitted heavily. I thought you had died with the others. The bodies, they were unrecognizable. I counted you among the lost until you spoke to me in that hotel corridor. Then I began to hope. Vanessa closed her fingers around the jade, feeling its familiar weight and texture. A tangible connection to the man who had saved her, raised her, loved her as his own. She slipped the pendant around her neck, tucking it beneath her shirt, close to her heart. Let's finish what he started, she said. The operation unfolded with mechanical precision. Young-ho made his approach to the front of the club, drawing attention and security resources exactly as planned. Meanwhile, Vanessa led a small team through the kitchen entrance, her hotel uniform and confident stride allowing her to walk past staff who automatically categorized her as belonging in their domain. The universal invisibility of service workers became her greatest weapon. They navigated to the VIP section where Jin-woo held court, timing their movements to coincide with Young-ho's distraction at the front. Vanessa positioned her team with silent hand signals, then slipped into the private room alone, a serving tray held before her like a shield. And there he was, Han Jin-woo, older than in her memories, his hair now threaded with gray, but his eyes were unchanged, cold, calculating, utterly devoid of empathy. The man who had ordered the deaths of the only family she had ever truly known, the architect of a decade of nightmares. He was surrounded by bodyguards and sycophants, holding court like the king he aspired to be. He glanced up as Vanessa entered, his gaze sliding over her dismissively. Just another black server, invisible, beneath notice. Vanessa placed drinks on the table with practiced grace, keeping her head bowed, listening as Jin-woo laughed about the pathetic security at Young-ho's approach. The son is as arrogant as the father, Jin-woo declared in Korean, walking into my trap like a child. By morning, the Park Empire will be mine. As Vanessa turned to leave, Jin-woo's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Her heart froze, but his attention wasn't on her face. It was on her hands, which had momentarily tensed in the distinctive way of someone trained in combat. You, he said, finally looking up at her face. You're not staff. The room went silent. Bodyguards reached for weapons. Vanessa remained perfectly still, trapped in Jin-woo's grip as his eyes narrowed in concentration, trying to place her. Recognition dawned slowly, horrifically. The black child. He breathed, genuine shock breaking through his composed exterior. Sangmin's pet project. His daughter, Vanessa corrected, dropping all pretense, straightening to her full height. My name is Park Min-ji. Jinwoo's shock turned to cruel amusement. Park? He gave you his name? How touching. The mighty Sangmin. So desperate for an heir, he adopted a stray from the docks. He saved me, Vanessa replied, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. Just as he tried to save those girls you trafficked. The ones he was investigating when you had him killed. Jinwoo's grip tightened painfully on her wrist. You understand nothing. Business is business. Sangmin forgot that. He became weak, sentimental. Like when he picked up a black orphan instead of calling the police. That was not weakness, Vanessa countered. That was his strength. He saw value where others saw nothing. The bodyguards moved forward at his signal, but Vanessa was already in motion. The serving tray became a weapon, disabling the nearest guard. She used Jinwoo's grip against him, a precise joint manipulation that left him howling in pain as bones ground against each other. The room erupted into chaos as Jung-ho's distraction at the front triggered the coordinated assault. Vanessa's team breached the room from multiple entry points, weapons drawn. In seconds, Jinwoo's security detail was neutralized, leaving the architect of so much suffering kneeling before Vanessa, clutching his shattered wrist. Jung-ho entered last, surveying the perfectly executed takeover with grudging admiration. You were right, he acknowledged to Vanessa. The trap was obvious. To someone who's been studying him for 10 years, Vanessa replied, her eyes never leaving Jinwoo's face. Jung-ho approached his uncle by marriage, the man who had sought to destroy his family twice. Han Jinwoo, he said formally, for conspiracy against the Park family, for the murder of Park Sangmin and his household, for trafficking under our name, the penalty is death. He raised his gun, but Vanessa placed her hand on his arm. No, she said quietly. Not like this. He deserves no mercy, Jung-ho argued. This isn't about mercy, Vanessa countered. It's about justice. Real justice, not just vengeance. She turned to Jinwoo. The evidence of your trafficking operation has been delivered to both Korean and American authorities. The financial records, the witness statements I've gathered from survivors, the DNA evidence from the shipping containers, all of it pointing directly to you, with no connection to the Park family. Jinwoo's face drained of color as he realized the full extent of her decade-long mission. Not just to kill him, but to systematically dismantle his entire operation, to expose his crimes to the world, to ensure he could never rebuild from the ashes. You would trust the police? He spat. Over Korean justice? This isn't just Korean justice, Vanessa replied. This is justice for girls from the Philippines, from Vietnam, from China, from Korea. Girls like I might have been if your brother-in-law's best friend hadn't found me first. Girls with no voice, no power, no one looking for them. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You don't get a quick death, Jinwoo. You get to live with what you've done. Locked in a cell, your name synonymous with the very worst of humanity. As Jinwoo was secured for the authorities, Vanessa stepped back, suddenly aware of the weight lifting from her shoulders. 10 years of single-minded focus, of rage carefully tended like a sacred flame, of a mission that had consumed every aspect of her existence. What will you do now? Jung-ho asked quietly, watching her with newfound respect. When this is finished. Vanessa touched the jade pendant beneath her shirt, feeling its smooth contours against her fingertips. I don't know, she admitted. I never planned for after. That night, as the authorities took Jinwoo into custody and the Park organization began the careful process of rebuilding, Vanessa returned to Old Man Parkside to deliver the news personally. The elderly crime boss received the information with dignified satisfaction, but his attention was fixed more on the woman before him than on the details of his brother-in-law's downfall. You honor Sangmin's memory, he said finally, not just with your victory, but with how you achieved it. I'm not sure he would approve of involving the authorities, Vanessa admitted. Old Man Park smiled faintly. You might be surprised. Sangmin always said true power lies in justice, not vengeance. It seems his daughter learned that lesson well. I'm not sure who I am now, she confessed, the admission raw and painful. For 10 years, I've been nobody and everybody. A waitress, a maid, a cleaner, a ghost. I've been Minji in my heart and Vanessa on paper. I've been Korean in my speech and black in a world that sees only that. You are both, the old man said simply. And that is your strength. Young-ho entered the room then, having overseen the final security arrangements. He looked exhausted but triumphant, a man who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. The organization is secure, he reported. Jinwoo's network is being dismantled as we speak. He paused, looking at Vanessa with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. None of this would have been possible without you. I had my own reasons, Vanessa replied, uncomfortable with gratitude for what had begun as a personal vendetta. Nevertheless, Young-ho continued, my father and I are in agreement. The Park family owes you a debt that cannot be repaid with money alone. Old man Park nodded solemnly. Park Sang-min was my brother in all but blood. His daughter is family, and family has a place in the organization, if she wants it. The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and transformative. After a decade of isolation, of existing on the periphery of both Korean and American society, Vanessa was being offered a home, a purpose, a place to belong. What exactly are you proposing? She asked carefully. A position commensurate with your skills, Young-ho replied. Security oversight, strategic planning, intelligence operations. His lips curved into a rare smile. Unless you prefer hotel work? I choose to find out, she said finally, meeting Young-ho's gaze directly. Not alone, but not defined by the past either. So here we are at the end, which is really just another beginning. The black maid who spoke Korean and saved a crime family. The orphan who avenged her foster father and found justice for countless nameless victims. The woman who existed between worlds and finally found her place bridging them. If you've been paying attention, you've learned what I learned. That family isn't always blood, that justice isn't always what we expect, and that sometimes our greatest strength lies in the very things that make us different. Vanessa Jenkins, Park Min-ji, showed a room full of powerful men that they'd been looking right through her, missing the most dangerous person in their midst because they couldn't see past her skin or her uniform. Their mistake, their loss, her victory. If her story speaks to you, remember this. In a world determined to make you invisible, your voice becomes your most powerful weapon. Use it, even when it shakes, especially when it shakes, because you never know who might be listening, or who might recognize in your words the echo of a home they thought was lost forever. Like and subscribe if you want more stories about the unexpected heroes hiding in plain sight, the warriors disguised as waitresses, the Avengers serving your coffee with a smile. Because trust me, they're out there. And they're watching.